NBC Studio One, Burbank, California, October 19th, 1972, 8:47 in the evening. Johnny Carson has not moved in 11 seconds. His pen is still in his right hand from the previous segment. His elbow is still on the desk. He has not put the pen down, has not leaned back, has not done any of the small physical things Johnny Carson does between moments on his own stage. He is completely still. And Johnny Carson is never completely still. 320 people in the studio audience are not making a sound. Not the held-breath silence of a crowd waiting for a punchline, something different. The specific, total silence of 320 people who have just watched something happen in real time and have not yet located the part of their brain that knows what to do with it. A man is on the floor of the Tonight Show stage, not backstage, not in the corridor, on the actual stage, under the NBC overhead lights, 12 feet from Johnny Carson's desk, in front of every camera that is still rolling because nobody in the production booth has thought to cut. He weighs 347 pounds. He cannot breathe. His face is the color of old brick, and his hands are flat on the floor, and his chest is not moving the way a chest is supposed to move. Bruce Lee is standing 4 feet away from him, 1 foot slightly back, hands at his sides. The overhead studio lights are humming at 60 hertz. That is the only sound in the building. Clint Eastwood is standing at the edge of the first curtain. He has not moved either. He is watching what Carson is watching, what 14 million Americans at home are watching, and none of them, not Carson, not Eastwood, not one person in that building, knows that the 347-pound man on the floor started it. And what Bruce Lee did in response took exactly 5 seconds. If you have never heard this story, stay with me, because what happened inside NBC Studios on that Tuesday night will permanently change the way you understand both of these men. Subscribe right now and don't go anywhere. What 14 million Americans watching at home did not know, what Johnny Carson himself did not know, was that the man on his stage had laughed at Bruce Lee 6 hours earlier, had called what Bruce Lee could do a performance, had said that real power belonged to real size, and that 132 pounds of anything was not a serious conversation. He would not make that argument again. To understand what happened on that stage, you have to go back 6 hours, to a production sheet and a laugh. Earl Delaney had been called Dutch since 1958, when a promoter in Portland decided that Earl was not a name that sold tickets, and Dutch was, and the name had followed him through 5 years on the Pacific Coast professional wrestling circuit, the way names do when they arrive at the right moment. Portland, Sacramento, San Jose, Fresno, the regional belts that never made national television, but made reputations among the men who understood what those belts cost. He held the Pacific Coast heavyweight title from 1963 through 1968, 5 years. In a circuit where the average reign lasted 7 months, 5 years meant something specific about the man holding the belt. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall. He weighed 347 pounds on the morning of October 19th, 1972. Not the soft weight of a man who has stopped working, the dense, structural weight of a man who has been large his entire adult life and has built a career on the fact of it. The kind of large that does not announce itself because it does not need to. The kind that changes the geometry of a room the moment it walks through the door. Clint Eastwood had hired him 16 months earlier, when Dirty Harry rapped in San Francisco, and Eastwood's management decided that his rising profile required a certain physical presence on location and at public events. Dutch had never needed to escalate beyond that presence. In 16 months, presence had always been sufficient. No situation had ever required anything beyond the fact of him standing in a room and being the largest thing in it. He had one philosophy about martial arts. He stated it freely to anyone who asked and to several people who did not. Real power, Dutch believed, belonged to real size. What men did in dojos and on movie sets, the choreography, the forms, the demonstration kicks aimed at cooperative partners, that was theater. Wrestling was real because the other man had not agreed to lose. Everything else was a performance with better costumes. He had said it to 3 different people in the 2 weeks before October 19th. A stuntman on the Eastwood lot, a security coordinator at a Universal event, a producer's assistant who had made the mistake of mentioning a martial arts film in his presence. He would say it one more time, at 3:05 in the afternoon, in the green room corridor of NBC Studios Burbank. Dutch picked up the production sheet for that evening's Tonight Show taping. He read the guest list. He read the weights listed beside each name. Clint Eastwood, listed at 189 pounds. Bruce Lee, listed at 132 pounds. Dutch looked at the number for a moment. He read the name above it. He looked at the number again. Then he laughed. Once. Not a cruel laugh. Not a mocking laugh. The short, involuntary laugh of a man who has found something unexpectedly small where he expected something significant. He set the sheet down and went back to his coffee. That laugh was the beginning of everything. NBC Studios, Burbank, October 19th, 1972, 4:30 in the afternoon. The Tonight Show taping is 90 minutes away, and something is already building in the green room corridor that nobody has named yet. Studio 1 is being lit for the evening. Johnny Carson arrives at 4:45 p.m. and walks the stage the way he always walks it before a taping, from the curtain edge to his desk and back, without speaking to anyone, in a circuit that takes 83 seconds and has taken 83 seconds every taping night since 1962. He stops at his desk. He moves the pencil cup 2 inches to the left. He walks back to his dressing room. The floor crew does not watch him do this. They have seen it enough times that it has become part of the architecture of the building itself. 2 separate green rooms. Eastwood in room C at the far end of the corridor. Bruce Lee in room B, 12 feet from the equipment cases lining the east wall. At 4:52 p.m., Dutch walks the corridor on his standard pre-taping security sweep, the route he has walked before every Eastwood appearance for 16 months. He passes the open door of room B and stops. Bruce Lee is standing in the far corner, not sitting, not speaking, standing, looking at a fixed point on the wall, approximately 3 inches above the floor molding, hands at his sides. He has been standing that way for 14 minutes. The production assistant near the door had checked her watch twice and said nothing. The stillness coming off the man was not the stillness of someone at rest. It was something more internal than that, something directed. Dutch looks at the 132-pound man in black, looks at the fixed point on the wall. He says something quiet to the NBC page behind him. The easy remark of a man who believes the distance between himself and the situation is absolute. Bruce Lee does not turn around. Dutch moves on. At 5:10 p.m., Dutch is moving through the narrowed section of the corridor near the equipment cases, mid-story, with Eastwood's publicist and an NBC page behind him. The story is about a stuntman on the Coogan's Bluff set who had claimed a judo black belt. It ends the way Dutch's martial arts stories always end. He is 3 sentences from the ending when he rounds the corridor angle and stops. Bruce Lee is standing in the narrowed hallway, not blocking it deliberately, occupying exactly the space his body requires and not 1 inch beyond. He is looking at Dutch with the calm, complete attention of a man who took the full measurement of what came around that corner and has already finished processing the result. Bruce Lee says 2 words, not a challenge, a question, quiet and direct. He had heard Dutch's story through the corridor. The corridor is 14 feet long, and Dutch tells stories at the volume of a man who spent 5 years projecting his voice across wrestling arenas without a microphone. The question is genuine. The question a man asks when he already suspects the answer and wants to watch the other man deliver it himself. Dutch looks at the page, then back at the 132-pound man in the narrowed hallway. He smiles the slow smile of a man who has been handed an opportunity he didn't have to create. What Dutch says next has been repeated in every account of that evening across 50 years. The wording changes, the meaning never does. He says something about size, something about weight, something about the difference between what works in movies and what works when the other man has not agreed to cooperate. It is the 401st time someone has said something like this to Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee nods, once, slowly. The nod of a man who receives this particular information regularly and finds it neither surprising nor interesting. That nod is what moves Dutch forward. Subscribe right now and stay with me, because what happens in the next 5 seconds has never been fully told, until now. Dutch Delaney has operated for 41 years on one unbroken empirical truth. His body has always been the largest thing in any room he has entered. And that fact, that single, physical, undeniable fact, has resolved every situation that has ever required resolving. He is not a cruel man. He is not a malicious man. He is a man who has accumulated 4 decades of evidence that a specific hierarchy exists in the physical world, and he has never once, not in Portland, not in Sacramento, not in 16 months of Hollywood security work, seen that evidence contradicted. He steps forward, once, into the narrowed corridor space between the equipment racks, where the east wall angles in, and the clearance compresses to 6 feet. He raises his right foot, a front kick, not aimed at Bruce Lee's body, directed to the left of his shoulder. A demonstration. The slow, telegraphed, absolute demonstration of a man who is completely certain that the distance between himself and any possible consequence is insurmountable. The kick travels the 3 feet between them. What happens next takes 5 seconds. Everyone present will spend the rest of their lives trying to describe it accurately, and none of them will fully succeed, because the human eye is not designed to process the thing Bruce Lee does at the speed Bruce Lee does it. Second 1. Bruce Lee's center of gravity drops 2 inches. Not a step back, not a lean. A drop, pure and immediate, and without any preparatory movement that the eye can locate. His left shoulder rotates back exactly 1 inch. No wind-up, no tell, no signal of any kind that the movement is coming before it has already arrived. Second 2. Dutch's foot passes through the space where Bruce Lee's left shoulder was. The kick completes its full arc into empty air. 347 pounds of committed forward momentum, with nothing at the end of it. In the corridor behind Dutch, the publicist takes 1 involuntary step backward. The NBC page does not move because he has not yet processed what he is watching. Second 3. Bruce Lee's right hand, open, not a fist, fingers locked together, a ridge hand, makes contact with Dutch's floating rib. Not the solar plexus, not the sternum, the 11th rib. The floating rib that has no sternal connection, and when contacted at the correct lateral angle with correct hip rotation behind it, causes the intercostal muscle group to seize in a full bilateral spasm that the body has no voluntary override for. No amount of size prevents it. No amount of wrestling experience prevents it. The body does what the body does when that specific nerve cluster receives that specific instruction. Second 4. Dutch's diaphragm locks. The air currently in his lungs has no pathway out. His knees begin their downward travel with the slow structural inevitability of a building that has lost its foundation. Not a collapse, a descent. The kind a man makes when his body has received information that his mind has not yet accepted. Second 5. Earl Dutch Delaney, 347 pounds, 6 feet 4 inches, Pacific Coast heavyweight wrestling champion, the largest thing in every room he has entered for 41 years, is on the floor of an NBC Studios corridor, looking up at the fluorescent ceiling fixtures, unable to breathe, not in the way a punch creates pain, in the specific, total foundational way of a body that has temporarily forgotten how to perform the one function it has executed without interruption since the moment of its birth. Bruce Lee steps back 2 paces, hands at his sides. He does not look at Dutch. He looks at the NBC page. He says 4 words. "Tell Mr. Carson I'm ready." He turns. He walks toward the stage. Behind him, the corridor is completely silent. And then, from the far end of the hallway, a door opens. Clint Eastwood steps out of room C. He had heard the specific quality of silence that follows something real. He walks to the edge of the half-circle that is formed around Dutch. He looks at his bodyguard on the floor. He watches Dutch's chest until the breathing returns. At 8 seconds, shallow and stuttering and desperate. And then Eastwood says something. Quiet. 1 sentence. To no one in particular, and to everyone present at the same time. Nobody in that corridor understands what it means. Not that evening. Not for years. The taping begins at 5:30 p.m. 320 people in Studio One. 14 million more at home across America. And somewhere in the building, in a dressing room with a monitor mounted on the wall, a 347-pound man is sitting very still, watching the screen, waiting to find out what the next 90 minutes will do to him. Johnny Carson opens with his monologue. 7 minutes and 40 seconds. The audience laughs where audiences laugh. The cameras move through their standard arcs. Everything about Studio One and 5:30 on a Tuesday in Burbank is exactly the way it always is. The floor director is hitting his marks. The band is in position. The pencil cup on Carson's desk is 2 inches to the left of where it started the afternoon. Clint Eastwood walks out at 5:47 p.m. Straight back, measured pace. The walk of a man who has never needed to announce his arrival before it happens. Carson asks about Joe Kidd. Eastwood gives the answers that are true and the ones that are not boring, which are occasionally the same list and occasionally not. The audience responds at the correct intervals. Everything is proceeding exactly as the production sheet scheduled it. Then Carson sets his pencil down. He does not pick up his notes. He does not look at the camera. He looks at Eastwood with the particular stillness of a man who is about to step off the prepared script and has already decided that is what he is going to do. I heard something happen backstage tonight. The studio goes quiet in the specific way it goes quiet when Carson leaves the script, and the audience recognizes it before the sentence is finished. Eastwood looks at Carson, then at the audience, then at the curtain to his right, behind which Bruce Lee is standing in his scheduled pre-segment position, 3 feet from the guest chairs, listening to every word being said on the other side of the fabric. Eastwood turns back to Carson. He says 4 words, delivered in the same register he used to discuss the film. Calm, flat, carrying the full weight of everything he witnessed in that corridor, without explaining a single detail of it. He's something else. Carson raises 1 eyebrow. The audience doesn't know whether to laugh or wait. They do neither. The 4 words sit in the studio like a stone dropped in still water, and the ripple moves outward through 320 people who don't have the context to understand what they are hearing, but understand instinctively that it is not nothing. Then the curtain moves, not on Carson's introduction, not on cue. Before any of that, Bruce Lee walks out and sits in the empty second guest chair. He sits the way a man sits when he has decided the timing is already correct, and external schedules are a secondary consideration. He is wearing the same black he was wearing in the corridor. He folds his hands in his lap. He looks at Johnny Carson. Carson looks at him for 3 full seconds. The pause is visible in every existing broadcast recording of that episode. 3 seconds on live television is an eternity. Carson has filled silences on this stage for 10 years without effort. He does not fill this one. I understand you were busy before the show, Carson says. Bruce Lee nods. Once. He'll breathe better by morning. 320 people deliver the uncertain laugh, the laugh of an audience that is not sure it has permission to find something funny, but cannot locate the alternative. And across the desk, Clint Eastwood looks at Bruce Lee for the first time since the corridor. A direct look, 3 seconds long, the same duration as Carson's pause, though nobody in the booth above notices the symmetry until years later when the tape is reviewed carefully. Something moves between them in those 3 seconds that no camera angle fully captures and no transcript fully conveys. Subscribe and ring the bell, because what that look contained took 37 years and one handwritten letter to explain. And the letter changes everything. Dutch Delaney watched the segment from the dressing room monitor. He watched Eastwood's 4 words land on the studio. He watched Carson's 3-second pause. He heard Bruce Lee say he would breathe better by morning, and he sat with his hands flat on his knees for a long time after the segment moved on to other things. He never spoke publicly about October 19th, 1972. Not to any journalist, not to any of the people who asked him about it in the years that followed, when the story quietly traveled through Hollywood security circles and production lots the way these stories travel. Person to person, corridor to corridor, always slightly different in the details and always identical in the core. He had one answer for everyone who asked. He delivered it the same way every time, without elaboration and without self-pity. I kicked first. That's the whole story. It was the most honest thing he ever said about it, and the people who heard it understood, without being told, that it was also a man's way of closing a door he did not intend to reopen. In 2009, during an archival review of Clint Eastwood's Malpaso Productions files in Burbank, a researcher found a handwritten letter dated March 1978, 14 pages, written to a former stunt coordinator named Bill Hart. The letter covered several subjects across those 14 pages. 3 paragraphs covered October 19, 1972. Eastwood described the corridor, the quality of silence that brought him out of room C, what he found when he reached the half circle around Dutch, and then he wrote out the one sentence he had said that evening, the sentence nobody present had understood at the time. That's what it looks like from the outside. The letter explained it. Eastwood wrote that he had been in enough real situations to recognize one when he saw it. And what he saw in that corridor was a man for whom there was no distance between stillness and movement. No preparation, no tell, no performance of any kind. Then, one final line. 14 pages, and it ended here. I don't know what Bruce Lee was. I know what he wasn't. He wasn't performing. Dutch had kicked first. Bruce Lee had simply answered, and the answer had taken 5 seconds and required nothing from Bruce Lee that Bruce Lee had not already been, in every corridor and every room and every moment of stillness directed at a fixed point on a wall, for his entire life. January 1973, 3 months after October 19th, Dutch Delaney drives across Los Angeles to a studio in Culver City. He parks, he walks in, he asks for Bruce Lee by name. He has not called ahead. He has not arranged anything. He simply drives across the city and walks through the door the way a man walks through a door when he has made a decision that does not require rehearsal. He does not challenge him. He does not explain himself at length. He stands in front of the 132-pound man who put him on an NBC corridor floor and asks one question. Bruce Lee looks at him for a moment. The same complete, unhurried measurement he had taken in the corridor. The same stillness. Then he says 2 words. Sit down. Dutch trained with Bruce Lee for 6 months, January through June of 1973. Every week, without interruption. The largest student Bruce Lee ever taught, sitting cross-legged on a studio floor, learning what he had spent 41 years believing he already understood. In July of 1973, Enter the Dragon released, and Bruce Lee was gone. Dutch never discussed martial arts again after that summer. Not from bitterness. The people who knew him described it consistently, across 40 years, as something closer to reverence. The reverence of a man who had been shown the difference between size and power, and had spent the rest of his life quietly understanding it. Clint Eastwood attended Bruce Lee's private memorial in Hong Kong. He sat in the third row. He did not speak. He had already said everything he needed to say, in a Burbank corridor, to a man who was still learning how to breathe. Some men spend entire careers performing power. Some men simply have it. The distance between those two things can be measured on any Tuesday evening, in any corridor, in any building, by anyone willing to find out. Bruce Lee did not need 30 seconds. He needed 5. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. These are the moments history almost forgot.